This week, I'm in the process of showing a film by Tony Gatliff to my world music classes. The film is called Auden, and it traces in music the historic migration of gypsy populations from northern India about 1,000 years ago to points west, North Africa, Asia Minor, Eastern and Western Europe. I have been using this beautiful film for several years now in my world music classes, both for the splendid music that it contains and also for the lessons that I think we can learn from it. One of the points that I try to make real to my students is this: unless we happen to be Aboriginal Africans, every single one of us has either migrated from some other land to the one where we now live, or there is a point in our family's history when some of our ancestors did that. And unless we're Aboriginal Australians or Americans or Mongolians, we or our forebears moved to a place that was already occupied by other humans. The reception our ancestors got upon their arrival in the new land is a part of our story. It has had a hand in the shaping of who we are. Human migration has always been a fact of the human adventure, and since the spread of agriculture over large parts of the globe by around 7,000 years ago, it's generally been true that those who pulled up stakes and moved did so because things weren't going well for them where they were. They were fleeing something: war, persecution, ravages of a changing climate. The same is true of our time and the flood of humans from places like South Sudan to other points in Africa where they hope to have at least some chance of survival, or from Syria into Europe. It makes clear that humans who are on the move are often best understood as refugees. It's never the well-heeled who pull up stakes and take the risk. It's in the second half of Auden where we start getting a real taste of what gypsies have endured at the hands of those whose lands they've tried to settle in. A 5-year-old girl on a train in Hungary sings about how her people are chased out of one country after another, hated for reasons that aren't clear to her. What business does a 5-year-old child have even knowing a song like that, much less understanding that it pertains to her own situation? A man whose family lives in a tree in Slovakia in the wintertime sings about being condemned to wander endlessly, hoping that their reception in Germany, where they're headed, will be better than what they've endured so far, hoping for a day when they won't be treated like dogs. I've spent a fair amount of time in Europe, and I've heard smug Europeans refer to gypsies as the cockroaches of Europe. During times of amped-up migration, those whose territories are being overrun, or they might say invaded, start talking about building really big walls and making the other country pay, or deporting millions of people because they don't carry the right papers or because they worship the wrong God. And it's not unusual to see a hard rightward turn among those who get very protective of their prerogatives and good fortune. Shrewd politicians know exactly how to play on the anxiety of those who might sweep them into office on a tide of paranoia. Their stump speeches are meant to rile up their base, foment their xenophobia and racism and class hatred. I've watched with horror as the U.S. has descended into cultural hell over the past year. I've seen how one of the major candidates for the highest office in this land works the anger regions of the brains of his followers, and I've heard the ugly things they say in response to his demagoguery. I've heard them advocate killing the other candidate or lynching the current occupant of the White House. What kind of country does that? If you don't know what I'm talking about, spend some time poking around here on YouTube. Search for Trump plus the ugliest racist epithets you can think of. That shit will come right up, and you can get a good hard look at it. This is profoundly disgusting. This is not the expression of a sane culture. I have never seen anything quite like it, although I do realize that all that race hatred and xenophobia was latent all along. We desperately need music and poetry. That's why I have this YouTube channel, and that's why I'm going to read this poem by W.H. Auden. It's a familiar poem, and I imagine most of those who bother to tune into my offerings here are already acquainted with it, but it surely won't hurt to hear it again, for the same reason that it's a good idea to revisit Beethoven's string quartets from time to time, no matter how well we think we know them. So here it is, September 1, 1939, by W.H. Auden. I sit in one of the dives on 52nd Street, uncertain and afraid as the clever hopes expire of a low, dishonest decade. Waves of anger and fear circulate over the bright and darkened lands of the earth, obsessing our private lives. The unmentionable odor of death offends the September night. Accurate scholarship can unearth the whole offense from Luther until now that has driven a culture mad, find what occurred at Linz, what huge imago made a psychopathic God. I and the public know what all school children learn. Those to whom evil is done do evil in return. Exiled Thucydides knew all that a speech can say about democracy and what dictators do, the elderly rubbish they talk to an apathetic grave, analyzed all in his book, the enlightenment driven away, the habit-forming pain, mismanagement, and grief. We must suffer them all again. Into this neutral air where blind skyscrapers use their full height to proclaim the strength of collective man, each language pours its vain competitive excuse. But who can live for long in a euphoric dream? Out of the mirror they stare, imperialism's face and the international wrong. Faces along the bar cling to their average day. The lights must never go out. The music must always play. All the conventions conspire to make this fort assume the furniture of home, lest we should see where we are, lost in a haunted wood, children afraid of the night who have never been happy or good. The windiest, militant, trash, important person's shout is not so crude as our wish. What Mad Nijinsky wrote about Diaghilev is true of the normal heart. For the error bred in the bone of each woman and each man craves what it cannot have, not universal love, but to be loved alone. From the conservative dark into the ethical life the dense commuters come, repeating their morning vow. I will be true to the wife. I'll concentrate more on my work. And hapless governors wait to resume their compulsory game. Who can release them now? Who can reach the dead? Who can speak for the dumb? All I have is a voice to undo the folded lie, the romantic lie in the brain of the sensual man in the street, and the lie of authority whose buildings grope the sky. There is no such thing as the state, and no one exists alone. Hunger allows no choice to the citizen or the police. We must love one another or die. Defenseless under the night our world in stupor lies, yet dotted everywhere ironic points of light flash out wherever the just exchange their messages. May I, composed like them of eros and of dust, beleaguered by the same negation and despair, show an affirming flame. Well, this old hillbilly doesn't have a lot of flame left, but I do know a few things about Beethoven's string quartets, and I'll be posting a video over the third of the Razumovsky quartets in a few days. I think people ought to listen to that music. It might help order their unquiet minds. And even though I know how unlikely it is that what I'm about to say pertains to anyone who watches my videos, I'm going to offer this. If you are considering voting for Donald Trump in November, now understand this does not constitute an endorsement of Hillary Clinton. I'm talking about Donald Trump. If you're thinking about doing that, you really need to rethink your position. Because if you do that, you will be encouraging the worst impulses of our dysfunctional culture and helping to pave the road to hell. It's your right to do it, just as it's your right to hold whatever batshit crazy opinions you feel like holding. But I'm telling you, if you vote for this monster, may God have mercy on your soul.